My parents forced my brother into unpaid labor, while I got everything. When I tried to help him, they had me declared mentally unstable and ruined my life. So I gathered medical evidence that exposed their entire community's dark secret. In my rural community in Alaska, every third baby born got marked as a debt child. The ceremony happened when you turned 10. Your parents would press a copper coin into your palm until it left a permanent mark. That mark meant you belonged to the family business. No wages, no rights, no future. You couldn't marry, couldn't own anything, couldn't leave until you'd earned the family $1 million profit. Nobody ever earned that much. The other kids got allowances and college funds. Debt children got work schedules and quotas. My parents ran 3 convenience stores, and my brother Nuka had been working in them since his 10th birthday. At community temple gatherings, parents would gossip about their debt children like prized horses. Only our people attended these meetings. Outsiders weren't welcome. Sitka pulled a 16-hour shift yesterday, Mrs. Koyak would say. Everyone pretended this was normal, but I watched my brother aging faster than any teenager should. Dark circles, bent shoulders, hands rough from endless box cutting. I was the second child, the lucky one who got to have dreams, and I dreamed of getting him out. The answer came during my economics class. Mr. Tikiak was explaining business structures when he mentioned something about minors and contracts. My heart started racing, because technically, Nuka had been 10 when they made him start working. I started researching. Library computers, careful Google searches when my parents were asleep. What I found made my hands shake. Everything they were doing was illegal. Child labor, unpaid wages, false imprisonment. But in our community, American law was something that happened to other people. So I got creative. I started documenting everything. Pictures of Nuka's timesheets, videos of him working at 2 a.m. on school nights, screenshots of family group chats where uncles bragged about their debt children's exhaustion. But I needed more than evidence. I needed allies. That's where the notebook came in. During family gatherings, while adults compared their debt children's productivity, I'd slip notes to the other free siblings. Your sister deserves better than this. Want to help me change things? Most were too scared, but slowly, a few started listening. We met in secret. Library study rooms, empty parking lots, anywhere our parents wouldn't think to look. There were 7 of us eventually, all free children with enslaved siblings. Each of us had a role. Denali tracked the money, proving our siblings had already generated millions. Kodiak researched legal precedents. I kept collecting evidence. The plan was simple. Gather enough proof, find the right moment, and expose everything at once. That moment came at the Tutega family's eldest daughter's engagement party. She was a debt child who'd somehow earned her million at age 32, the first one in 5 years. The whole community gathered to celebrate this success story. Halfway through her speech about gratitude and family honor, I noticed her hands shaking. She kept touching her copper scar. When she finished, her father announced her reward. She could now marry his business partner's son, a man twice her age who needed a wife who understood hard work. I stood up, not part of the plan, but I couldn't watch another second. She's not free if you're still controlling her life, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother's face went pale. Uncles started moving toward me, but then Denali stood up. They owe my brother $200,000 in wages. Kodiak was next. That's called human selling. One by one, we held up our phones, showing receipts, recordings, photographs, years of evidence. This ends now, I said. That's when the door opened. 3 people in suits walked in, lawyers we'd contacted from a labor rights organization. Behind them, 2 police officers. We've been informed of multiple labor law violations, one announced. The room erupted. Parents grabbed for phones while debt children froze in place. The lawyers moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, handing out business cards. We represent a coalition of labor rights organizations, the lead attorney announced. We've received substantial documentation of systematic violations. Officer Chen, the younger of the 2 police officers, pulled out a notebook. We're here to conduct welfare checks on any minors currently employed. My father stepped forward, his face calm but his knuckles white. This is a private religious ceremony. You have no right. We have every right when child welfare is involved, the attorney interrupted. No arrests tonight, just questions. My mother had her phone out, recording everything. This is harassment of our cultural practices. I want badge numbers. The room erupted in rapid texting. I recognized the pattern. Our community's emergency phone tree, designed for exactly this scenario. Within seconds, messages would reach every family with a debt child. The Tutega patriarch raised his voice. Everyone under 18, please go to the youth room for prayer circle. Debt children began filing out obediently. Nuka moved with them. His shoulders slumped. I tried to follow, but my mother's hand clamped on my arm. Family stays together, she hissed. Officer Chen noticed the separation. We'll need to speak with those young people. After they finish prayers, my father said smoothly. Now, what documentation do you need? The lead attorney stepped forward. Employment records for any workers under 18, just to verify compliance. We'll need to consult with our lawyer about religious exemptions first, my father responded. Through the window, I saw 2 families quietly loading into their cars. Inside, parents huddled in groups, phones glowing as they coordinated responses. The youth room door stayed firmly closed. I pulled out my phone, showing Officer Chen the photos I'd collected. These were taken at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. That's my brother. Those images are taken out of context. A new voice interrupted. Marcus Ikaluit, the community's lawyer, strode in adjusting his tie. I represent the families here. Any documentation you're seeing relates to our cultural apprenticeship program. He produced a folder thick with papers. Traditional skills training, protected under religious freedom statutes. We've been preparing this documentation for years. My stomach dropped. They'd been ready for this. I'd like to speak with Officer Chen checked his notes. Nuka, about his work experience. The youth room door opened. Nuka emerged with the other debt children, their faces carefully blank. When Officer Chen approached him, Nuka's response came out rehearsed. I'm learning valuable skills from my family. It's an honor to contribute. The words sounded hollow in his exhausted voice, but he maintained eye contact with the officer. Behind him, other debt children nodded in agreement. We'll need copies of that apprenticeship documentation, the attorney said to Marcus. That requires tribal council approval to share with outsiders. Marcus replied smoothly. I can file the request, but it takes time. The lawyers exchanged glances. This wasn't going how any of us had planned. We'll be conducting formal interviews over the coming weeks, Officer Chen announced. This is just the beginning of our investigation. Parents throughout the room exchanged satisfied looks. The system they'd built was holding. As the officers and lawyers filed out, taking our contact information, I caught Nuka's eye. He shook his head slightly. Don't push it, his expression said. Not now. The rest of the party dissolved into chaos. Families hurried home, phones buzzing with instructions. My parents flanked me as we walked to the car. You've brought shame on this family. Emily, my mother said, her voice deadly quiet, but we'll handle this. We always do. I woke the next morning to my roommate shaking me. You need to see your car. All 4 tires had been slashed. Traitor was spray painted across the windshield in red. I called the police, but when they arrived, none of my neighbors had seen anything. At work that afternoon, my boss, one of my uncle's fishing buddies, called me into his office. We need to talk about your future here, he said, not meeting my eyes. There are community concerns about your recent actions. I knew his son was a debt child too. I'd seen him working the night shift at their hardware store. Are you firing me? Let's call it a mutual parting. Effective immediately. My phone buzzed. The family group chat notification showed I'd been removed. A new chat called True Family had been created. My siblings who'd stood with me at the party were missing too. That evening, Denali called. My landlord just gave me 30 days to vacate. Says I violated my lease, but won't say how. They're coordinating, I said, cutting us off from everything. CPS scheduled my interview, she said. 3 weeks from now. They said it's not an emergency removal situation, so they're backlogged. 3 weeks. The community would have plenty of time to prepare their stories. At school the next day, my younger siblings walked past me in the hallway without acknowledgement. When I tried to talk to my sister, she backed away. You're hurting our family, she said, loud enough for others to hear. Why can't you just leave things alone? The grocery store was my next surprise. My credit card was declined at checkout. The manager apologized, saying their system showed technical difficulties. But when I called the bank, they confirmed my account had been frozen. There seems to be some unusual activity, the representative said vaguely. You'll need to come in person to resolve it. The bank manager, another community member, explained there were concerns about fraudulent transactions. It would take weeks to investigate and unfreeze my funds. I survived on the cash in my wallet and the kindness of Kodiak, who let me crash on his couch. But I could see the strain in his eyes. His family was pressuring him too. The community Facebook page lit up with posts about outside attacks on our traditions. My photo from the party was shared dozens of times. The comments ranged from disappointed to threatening. Then came the restraining order. My parents filed it, claiming harassment and emotional distress. They said my unstable behavior at the party and my continued attempts to destroy our family made them fear for their safety. Jake texted me that night. My parents say I can't talk to you until this misunderstanding is resolved. I'm sorry. One by one, our group was being isolated. Kodiak made a discovery that gave us brief hope. The apprenticeship papers Marcus had shown were all dated recently, notarized by the mayor's wife just last week. They're backdating everything, he said, creating a paper trail that never existed. But when we brought this to the lawyers, we hit another wall. The mayor's wife claimed she'd been notarizing these documents for years. She even had a filing system with papers supposedly dating back decades. It's your word against an entire community's documentation, our legal aid attorney explained. This is going to be an uphill battle. I stood at the courthouse steps, restraining order papers in my hand. Fighting it would cost money I didn't have, but not fighting meant accepting legal separation from my own family and from NUCA. The smart choice was to save resources for the larger fight. But watching my brother disappear behind legal walls while our parents tightened their grip made the smart choice feel like abandonment. I thought about the Tutega daughter, finally free at 32, only to be handed to another master. About Nuka's exhausted face as he recited his rehearsed lines. About all the debt children who'd been failed by every system meant to protect them. The community had built their fortress carefully, brick by brick, over generations. They'd prepared for this day, knowing someday someone might challenge them. Every escape route had been mapped and blocked, but they'd made one mistake. They'd raised us to be smart, to think strategically, to persist. And I wasn't going to stop now. My mother's next move came through my apartment building's management office. The property manager called me in, explaining that multiple tenants had complained about disruptive visitors at my unit. I hadn't had any visitors except Kodiak. We take community harmony very seriously, she said, sliding a notice across the desk. This is your first warning. The warning cited noise complaints from times I'd been at work. Security footage would prove I wasn't even home, but when I asked to see it, she claimed the system had been malfunctioning that week. Outside her office, I recognized 2 cars in the parking lot, both belonging to community members. They weren't even trying to hide their coordination anymore. My mother appeared at my workplace the following afternoon, flanked by 3 other community mothers. They stood outside the coffee shop where I'd found temporary work, holding hands in what they called a prayer circle. Customers started avoiding the entrance. My manager watched nervously through the window. Is that your family? Unfortunately, they're saying you're mentally unstable, that you need help. I watched my mother dab at her eyes with a tissue, performing grief for passing strangers. One woman stopped to comfort her, and I could see my mother's lips moving, spreading her poison. I need this job, I told my manager. He looked uncomfortable. I know, but I can't have this disrupting business. The prayer circle continued for 3 days. Each day, different community members joined, creating the illusion of widespread concern. They brought signs, pray for our lost child, and mental health matters. On the 4th day, my manager handed me my final paycheck. My parents' next weapon was more personal. They released my college counseling records to the community Facebook page. Sessions from my freshman year, when I'd struggled with anxiety after realizing the truth about our family. The counselor's notes, obtained through my mother's signature on old forms, painted a picture of paranoia and family conflict. Patient exhibits signs of delusional thinking regarding family dynamics, one entry read. I remembered that session, trying to explain the debt child system to an outsider who couldn't fathom such a thing existed. The comments poured in. Community members shared their own stories of my troubled behavior, the time I'd questioned the ceremony at age 12, my disrespect for tradition. Each story carefully crafted to build a narrative of mental instability. Denali called that night, her voice shaking. They're using the same playbook on all of us. My parents just filed for a wellness check, claiming I'm suicidal. Are you safe? For now. But my roommate's spooked. She's already looking for someone to take over my part of the lease. We were being systematically destroyed, and the authorities designed to protect us were being weaponized against us. My 12-year-old sister's testimony to her school counselor was the next blow. She claimed I'd cornered her at school, ranting about family conspiracies, that I'd scared her with wild accusations about our parents. The truth was simpler. I'd asked if she was okay, if she needed anything. But in her statement, guided by our parents' coaching, it became harassment. Child Protective Services called me in for an interview, not about the debt children, about my potential threat to my younger siblings. We've received concerning reports, the social worker explained. Multiple family members have expressed worry about your mental state and its impact on the children. I sat in that sterile office, realizing the brilliance of my parents' strategy. Every attempt to save the debt children was being reframed as the delusions of a mentally unstable person who posed a threat to normal children. I'm trying to help them. them, I said. By disrupting their stable family environment? She looked at her notes. Your sister says you've been filling her head with disturbing stories. The interview lasted 2 hours. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered was dismissed as an obsession. My documentation was reframed as stalking. My allies were described as equally troubled individuals I'd convinced to share my delusions. Security footage from the stores became the next battleground. The lawyers had subpoenaed months of recordings, hoping to document the debt children's work hours. But when the files arrived, they were corrupted, except for specific clips. One showed me arguing with my father in the store, my face contorted with anger. Another caught me raising my voice at my mother. A third showed me, aggressively, photographing Nuka while he tried to work. Each clip carefully preserved while the surrounding context vanished. Digital files can be temperamental, Marcus explained to the lawyers with practiced sympathy. We've been meaning to upgrade our system. The first CPS interviews with the debt children went exactly as the community had planned. 3 teenagers sat in the community center, calmly explaining their gratitude for their family's guidance. They spoke of learning valuable skills, of contributing to something meaningful. I could be on the streets, one said, his memorized lines delivered perfectly. My family gave me purpose. The investigator took notes, finding no signs of physical abuse, no immediate danger. The debt children had been well coached, their exhaustion explained as dedication, their scars as accidents from learning their trade. The investigation will continue, the investigator told me afterward, but I need to be honest. I'm not seeing what you described. That night, desperate for any advantage, I did something I'd later regret. I still had my mother's Amazon password from when I'd lived at home. I logged in, searching for evidence of the copper ceremony supplies. The purchase history revealed monthly orders of copper coins, dating back years, bulk purchases that suggested ongoing ceremonies, new children being marked regularly. But I'd obtained it illegally, making it useless as evidence. Worse, my mother had anticipated this. The next morning, I received an email from Amazon about suspicious account activity. My digital footprint on her account was now evidence of my continued harassment. Denali's brother's Facebook post went viral within our community. My sister thinks she's saving me, he wrote. But I was nothing before my family gave me direction. I was heading down a dark path. Working for my family saved my life. Denali's jealousy is destroying our bonds. The comments flooded in, other debt children sharing similar stories. Each post carefully crafted to show gratitude, to paint us as bitter siblings jealous of the special bond between debt children and their families. I suggested to our lawyers that we investigate the mayor's connections to the community. His wife's notary stamp on the backdated documents was our strongest evidence of conspiracy, but the lawyers pulled back. Accusing local government officials without solid proof will complicate everything, they warned. We need to focus on the labor violations. But the labor violations were disappearing behind walls of paperwork and cultural explanations. The federal labor department's response crushed what hope remained. They needed more substantial evidence before opening a formal investigation. The agent suggested we document patterns for another 6 months, then recontact them. 6 months. I thought of Nuka's hands, already scarred from years of box cutting. 6 more months of 16-hour days. 6 more months of stolen youth. 4 of our 7 allies cracked under the pressure. One by one, they posted public apologies on the community page. They'd misunderstood the situation. They respected cultural traditions. They were seeking counseling for their confusion. Each defection came with rewards. Jobs returned, family relationships restored, financial pressure eased. The community knew how to punish, but they also knew how to forgive those who fell back in line. Then came Nuka's text. Private. Sent from a number I didn't recognize. Please stop. You're making everything worse for us. My hands shook as I typed back. I'm trying to help you. You're not helping. You're making them angry, making them push us harder. Please, just stop. The text disappeared moments later. The number disconnected, but his words haunted me. Was I fighting for them or for my own need to be right? My parents' offer arrived through their lawyer. Graduate school, fully funded, therapy with a respected counselor to process my confusion. A chance to rejoin the family if I publicly apologized and acknowledged my misunderstanding of our traditions. The offer includes housing, Marcus explained over the phone. Your parents want to support your future, despite everything. The subtext was clear. Submit or continue losing everything. Kodiak found something in the digital records that gave us brief hope. Bank transfers showing offshore accounts, money flowing from the family businesses to accounts in places with banking privacy laws. But he'd obtained it through illegal means, hacking into systems we had no right to access. We can't use this, I said, staring at the evidence that could crack everything open. I know, he replied, but at least we know we're right. Being right meant nothing if we couldn't prove it legally. Mrs. Koyak's defamation lawsuit arrived the same day I was evicted. $50,000 in damages for malicious statements that damaged her business reputation. Her store had lost customers after my false accusations became public. Fighting the lawsuit while homeless seemed impossible, but not fighting meant accepting defeat, letting her win by default. I moved into my car, showering at the gym, trying to maintain some dignity while my world collapsed. The Walmart parking lot became my bedroom, their security cameras the only witnesses to my new reality. My parents staged a wellness check at my former apartment, arriving with police to find me gone. The story spread quickly. I'd abandoned my home, was living somewhere unstable, clearly spiraling into mental illness. The email firing me from the coffee shop cited job abandonment, even though I'd requested leave to handle legal matters. Another mark against my stability. Another piece of evidence that I was the problem. Sleeping in my car in that Walmart lot, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if they were right. Had I lost everything for nothing? Was I the delusional one, seeing abuse where there was only tradition? The CPS report arrived like a final verdict. Cultural practices observed do not meet threshold for removal, it concluded. No immediate danger identified. Case remains open for continued monitoring. Continued monitoring meant nothing. The debt children would continue working, continue suffering, while bureaucrats checked boxes and filed reports. Something inside me snapped with Jake's betrayal. His family's fishing permits were their lifeline, passed down through generations, but those permits had been obtained through profits from debt children's labor. The whole system was built on their backs. I posted Jake's family tax documents online, showing the connections between their fishing empire and unpaid labor. The IRS audit that followed was swift and devastating. Within weeks, his grandmother lost the home she'd lived in for 40 years. The community's response was immediate and brutal. Jake's grandmother suffered a stroke during the audit stress, and everyone knew who to blame. At the hospital, my mother found me in the waiting room. Look what your pride has done, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. An old woman losing her home. Are you satisfied? I wanted to scream about the debt children who'd never have homes, homes, about Nuka's scarred hands and stolen future. But surrounded by community members in that hospital, I stayed silent. Kodiak suggested surrender. Take their offer, he said one night as I charged my phone in his apartment. Go to graduate school. Fight from within the system once you have credentials. It was logical, strategic, everything they'd raised me to be. But accepting meant abandoning Nuka now, when he needed me most. To control the narrative, I made another desperate choice. I publicly shared my teenage psychiatric hospitalization records before my parents could weaponize them. Yes, I'd struggled with self-harm at 15. Yes, I'd been hospitalized for 2 weeks. The truth was less dramatic than whatever story they'd spin. I'm not perfect, I wrote, but imperfect people can still recognize injustice. The medical records from the free clinic provided our first real evidence. Debt children presenting with repetitive stress injuries, chronic fatigue, malnutrition, years of documentation that no one had ever connected to abuse. Dr. Nathaniel, who'd treated them for years, admitted the truth when confronted. I suspected, he said quietly, but these are close-knit families. I didn't want to break them apart over cultural differences. His records showed what we'd always known. Children working themselves into physical breakdown, their growth stunted, their bodies bearing the weight of family profit. But the judge set our hearing for 6 months out. Civil rights cases required thorough preparation, especially when cultural and religious freedoms were involved. 6 more months of waiting while debt children suffered. My parents' strategy became clear as weeks passed. Delay until I broke. Drag out proceedings until I either gave up or gave in. They specifically wanted me to need psychiatric intervention, to end up in the same facility where they'd sent difficult relatives before. I started playing their game, attending family dinners with a recorder hidden in my pocket, smiling through Nuka's exhaustion while documenting every word, pretending reconciliation while gathering evidence. We're so glad you're coming around, my mother said, serving me food bought with debt children's labor. Family is everything. I nodded and smiled and hated myself for the deception. But their own tactics had taught me that sometimes love meant being willing to betray. The recordings captured fragments. My father saying tradition means sacrifice. My mother admitting they'd saved thousands using family labor. But our lawyer explained it wasn't enough. Nothing explicitly illegal. Nothing that couldn't be explained as cultural metaphor. My parents knew about the recordings. They began speaking in code words, switching to our indigenous language for sensitive topics. The dinner conversations became performances, each of us pretending while maneuvering for advantage. The battle shifted to interpretation. Was this systematic abuse or strict parenting? Cultural tradition or labor exploitation? Every piece of evidence could be read both ways, depending on your perspective. Character witnesses lined up to testify about my troubled history. Teachers who remembered my defiance. Relatives who recalled my attention-seeking behavior. Each story carefully selected to paint me as someone who'd always resented our traditions. 2 debt children reached out secretly, whispering support in chance encounters, but they feared losing the only family they'd known. Where would they go if the system fell? Who would take in teenagers trained only for convenience store labor? Their fear was reasonable. We were trying to destroy their world without being able to guarantee a better one. The pro bono lawyers withdrew, citing resource constraints. The case was too complex, too culturally sensitive, too unlikely to generate the clear victory they needed for their reports. We were left with overworked legal aid attorneys who had dozens of other cases. I found myself sleeping on the floor of a debt child named Ailey. She worked 4 a.m. to midnight shifts, and I saw firsthand what I'd been fighting to end. But I also saw something else. The strange contentment of routine, the pride in meeting quotas, the genuine affection between debt children who'd grown up together in the stores. You don't understand, Allie told me one night. This is all we know. You're trying to save us from the only life we have. Living among them revealed layers I'd missed. The psychological conditioning ran deeper than physical labor. They found identity in their service, purpose in their sacrifice. Breaking the system meant breaking them too. The discovery that shattered my remaining innocence came by accident. I found pills in Ailey's bathroom, assumed they were vitamins. Research revealed the truth. Contraceptives, distributed to all debt children as health supplements. My parents had been chemically sterilizing them, preventing pregnancies that would interfere with work. Nuka had been taking them since puberty, never knowing what they were. I thought about all my complaints about college stress while my brother was being systematically denied his future, his body controlled at the chemical level. The guilt was suffocating. Dr. Nathaniel's records confirmed it. He'd prescribed the vitamins on parents' orders, telling himself it was reversible, that preventing teen pregnancy in workers was responsible. He'd known and stayed silent, like everyone else who'd touched this system. His documentation showed something else. I'd benefited from free healthcare funded by debt children's labor. Every checkup, every prescription, every vaccine had been paid for by their suffering. I wasn't just fighting for them. I was fighting against my own complicity. The temptation to exaggerate evidence grew stronger as our case weakened. A few altered documents, some enhanced recordings. Who would know? The truth wasn't enough to win justice, but I resisted. Even as I watched Nuka work another 20-hour shift. Even as more debt children developed chronic injuries. The high road felt like abandonment, but I took it anyway. My obsessive recording alienated our remaining allies. Every conversation became evidence gathering. Every interaction was calculated for legal value. I was becoming what my parents accused me of. Someone who saw conspiracy everywhere, who trusted no one. Then came the revelation that changed everything. My parents had been recording too. Every emotional outburst, every desperate phone call, every breakdown in my car, they'd captured it all. Marcus presented their evidence with theatrical flair. A compilation of my instability, crying jags, angry rants, moments of despair edited together into a portrait of mental illness. They'd been building their case as carefully as I'd built mine. The community rallied behind my parents with a fundraiser for their legal persecution defense. Thousands of dollars poured in from families who saw themselves in my parents' struggle. They weren't just fighting me, they were fighting for their way of life. As the trial date approached, I stood alone. No allies left, no resources, no home. Just me against an entire community's testimony, armed with evidence that could be interpreted a dozen different ways. But I thought of Nuka's scarred hands, of Allie's stolen future, of the Tutega daughter handed from one master to another, of all the debt children whose only hope was someone willing to lose everything for the chance to free them. The system had taken everything from me, but it had made one mistake. It had left me with nothing left to lose. I found myself sleeping on Ailey's floor again, listening to her alarm go off at 3:45 a.m. She stepped over me carefully, already moving in the practiced rhythm of someone who'd been doing this for years. I pretended to sleep while she got ready for another 20-hour shift. The pills I'd discovered sat heavy in my mind. Every morning she took one with her coffee, never questioning what they were. Just another vitamin, another supplement to keep her healthy enough to work. I waited until she left before pulling out my phone. The trial date was 2 weeks away, and I had nothing new. Just the same evidence that could be explained away as cultural misunderstanding. Dr. Nathaniel had agreed to meet me at a diner outside town. He looked older than I remembered, shoulders bent with the weight of what he'd been carrying. I've been prescribing those vitamins for 15 years, he said, staring at his coffee. Told myself it was for their own good. Teen pregnancy would only make their lives harder. I recorded our conversation openly this time. No more hiding. Will you testify? He shook his head. My practice would be destroyed. My own family. Another dead end. Another person choosing self-preservation over truth. That afternoon, I discovered my parents had been recording me too. Marcus presented it during our pre-trial meeting, a compilation of my worst moments. Me sobbing in my car, me screaming at my mother, me pacing Allie's tiny apartment at 2 a.m., muttering to myself, "This is what the jury will see," he said, almost sympathetically. A troubled young person attacking stable families. Our legal aid attorney looked defeated. We had medical records showing injuries, but they could be explained as workplace accidents. We had evidence of unpaid labor, but it was protected under religious exemptions. We had proof of systematic control, but it looked like strict parenting to outsiders. The community's fundraiser for my parents had raised $30,000. They'd hired 2 more lawyers, experts in religious freedom cases. Meanwhile, I was down to my last $100 and stealing Wi-Fi from the McDonald's next door. Kodiak called that night with news that made my hands shake. 3 more families just filed apprenticeship paperwork. They're expanding the program. What? They're calling it a cultural revival, bringing back traditional values. The mayor's office is supporting it as preserving indigenous practices. They weren't just defending the system, they were growing it. I drove to the courthouse the next morning to file another motion, but my car died in the parking lot. The engine made a grinding sound, then nothing. The mechanic at the shop looked at it for 5 minutes before delivering the verdict. Engine seized. You've been running it without oil changes for too long. Another $2,000 I didn't have. Another problem I couldn't solve. I walked the 3 miles back to Allie's apartment, my mind racing. Every path forward seemed blocked. Every move anticipated and countered. That's when I saw Nuka outside our parents' store, unloading boxes. His movements were slower than I remembered, and when he lifted his arm, I noticed something that made me stop cold. The copper scar on his palm was infected. Red streaks ran up his wrist, the skin swollen and angry. He kept working, ignoring what had to be incredible pain. I took photos from across the street, zooming in on the infection. This wasn't just a scar anymore. This was medical neglect. Dr. Nathaniel's clinic was closed when I arrived, but I pounded on the door until he answered. "You need to see this," I said, showing him the photos. His face went pale. "That's blood poisoning. He needs immediate treatment." "Then treat him. I can't just. You've been medicating them for years. You've been part of the system. The least you can do is provide actual medical care." He stared at the photos again, and I saw something shift in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Or just exhaustion from carrying secrets. "Bring him in," he said quietly. "After hours, I'll treat him off the books." Getting Nuka to come was another challenge. I had to wait until his shift ended at midnight, catch him before our parents picked him up. He looked at me with tired eyes when I explained about the infection. "It's fine," he said. "Just part of the job. It's blood poisoning. You could lose your hand, or worse." He glanced at the store, then back at me. "If I miss work tomorrow, I'll cover for you. Say you're with me. They can't violate the restraining order to check." It was a risk, but he was too tired to argue. Dr. Nathaniel's treatment revealed more than just the infection. X-rays showed multiple fractures in Nuka's hands that had healed wrong. Blood work revealed malnutrition despite working in stores full of food. The vitamins had done their own damage too. Hormonal imbalances that would take years to correct. "This is systematic medical neglect," Dr. Nathaniel said, documenting everything. "I should have reported this years ago." "Report it now," I said. He looked at Nuka, then at me. "The trial's in 2 weeks?" "Yes. I'll need protection. If I testify, the community will destroy me. We'll figure something out." But I had no idea how to protect him. I couldn't even protect myself. The next morning, Nuka's infection made the decision for us. He collapsed during his morning shift, fever spiking to 104. A customer called 911, and suddenly there were paramedics, police, and questions no one wanted to answer. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what Dr. Nathaniel had found: severe infection, blood poisoning, years of untreated injuries. They had to report it. Medical neglect of this severity triggered mandatory reporting. My parents arrived with Marcus, trying to control the narrative, but hospital social workers aren't as easily intimidated as CPS investigators. They had medical evidence, documented injuries, a paper trail that couldn't be explained away. "This is still a family matter," Marcus argued. Cultural practices don't override medical neglect," the social worker interrupted. "We're opening an investigation." For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. The investigation moved quickly. Every debt child had to be examined. Every family had to produce medical records. What they found was damning. Years of untreated injuries, malnutrition, hormonal damage from the vitamins. Dr. Nathaniel came forward, bringing 15 years of records with him. His testimony was devastating. He documented everything, even as he'd stayed silent. Now, facing potential criminal charges himself, he was ready to talk. The trial date arrived with the entire community in upheaval. Half the families were under investigation. The other half were scrambling to distance themselves from the system they'd all benefited from. I sat in the courthouse bathroom, throwing up from nerves. Everything came down to this. Years of evidence, months of fighting, all leading to a few hours in front of a judge. The courtroom was packed. Community members filled one side, glaring at me. The other side held social workers, investigators, and a few journalists who'd gotten wind of the story. My parents sat with their team of lawyers, looking confident despite everything. They'd built their defense carefully. Religious freedom, cultural preservation, parental rights. They had experts ready to testify about indigenous practices and the importance of maintaining traditions. Our side had medical records and one guilt-ridden doctor. The judge entered, and I recognized her. Judge Martinez, known for being tough but fair. She'd handled religious freedom cases before. Marcus opened with passion, painting a picture of cultural persecution, outside forces trying to destroy indigenous practices, families torn apart by misunderstanding. He was good, I had to admit. Every point crafted to trigger sympathy. Our lawyer responded with facts, medical records, photographs of injuries, the vitamins that were actually birth control. Dr. Nathaniel's testimony about years of systematic neglect. Then Nuka was called to testify. He sat in the witness chair, his bandaged hand visible to everyone. When asked about his work, he started with the rehearsed lines. But then the prosecutor asked about his hand. "It's It's infected, he said quietly. How long has it been infected? A few weeks. Why didn't you seek treatment? He glanced at our parents, then back at the prosecutor. I couldn't miss work. What would happen if you missed work? The courtroom was silent. Nuka's struggle was visible on his face. Years of conditioning warring with the truth. I'd be punished, he finally said. How? Extra shifts. No food. Sometimes. He stopped. Sometimes what? Sometimes they'd press the coin again, to remind me. Gasps from the social worker's side. Furious whispering from the community's side. The prosecutor showed photos of other debt children's hands. Some had multiple scars, pressed over and over as punishment. The medical evidence was undeniable. My mother tried to stand, to say something, but her lawyer pulled her down. More debt children testified. Their stories variations on the same theme. Work, punishment, control. The vitamins they'd never questioned. The injuries they'd hidden. The education they'd never received. By lunch, the community's defense was crumbling. Marcus made one last attempt, calling character witnesses to testify about my mental instability. The edited recordings of my breakdowns. The narrative of a troubled child attacking loving families. But it felt hollow now, faced with the medical evidence. The judge's expression remained neutral, but I caught her looking at Nuka's bandaged hand repeatedly. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. Our lawyer spoke about children's rights, about labor laws that apply regardless of culture, about the difference between tradition and exploitation. Marcus countered with religious freedom, parental rights, the danger of outside interference in indigenous practices. He painted the debt children as willing participants in a cultural tradition. The judge called a recess to deliberate. Those 2 hours felt like years. When she returned, her expression was grave. This court recognizes the importance of cultural traditions and religious freedom, she began. However, these rights do not supersede children's basic human rights to education, medical care, and freedom from exploitation, she continued, outlining her findings. The debt child system violated multiple labor laws. The medical neglect constituted abuse. The apprenticeship documentation was fraudulent. Effective immediately, all minor children engaged in unpaid labor must cease work. Families have 30 days to comply with labor laws regarding any adult workers. Medical treatment must be provided for all injuries sustained. The practice of marking children with copper coins is prohibited. The community side erupted, some crying, others shouting about persecution. My parents sat frozen, their carefully built system crumbling in minutes. But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, any family found in violation will face criminal charges. CPS will monitor compliance. This court will reconvene in 90 days to assess progress. No criminal charges yet. No one going to jail. Just an order to stop. It felt both like victory and defeat. Outside the courthouse, families clustered in confused groups. Some debt children looked lost, unsure what to do without their work schedules. Others seemed cautiously hopeful. Nuka found me by the steps. What happens now? He asked. I didn't have an answer. The system was broken, but nothing had replaced it. Families who depended on free labor would struggle. Debt children trained for nothing but store work would need education, therapy, time to heal. My parents walked past without acknowledging me. The restraining order was still in effect. I was still homeless, jobless, broke. But Nuka was free. Dr. Nathaniel approached, looking older but somehow lighter. I'm closing my practice, he said, moving south, starting over. I wanted to apologize for everything. I nodded, too exhausted for forgiveness or condemnation. The next months were chaos. Some families adapted, hiring actual employees. Others closed their businesses. A few tried to continue in secret, leading to arrests and more investigations. Nuka moved in with Ali and me. We found a 2-bedroom apartment, barely scraping together rent. He enrolled in GED classes, struggling with education gaps from years of work. The hormonal damage from the vitamins required ongoing treatment we couldn't afford. The community split. Some blamed me for destroying their way of life. Others quietly thanked me for freeing their children. Most just tried to survive the economic upheaval. I found work at a nonprofit focused on labor rights, using my experience to help other communities with similar practices. It paid barely enough to live on, but it felt like purpose. 2 years later, I sat across from Nuka at our weekly dinner. He was 23, working part-time while attending community college. The copper scar had faded but never disappeared. We didn't talk much during these dinners. Too much history, too much pain. But we showed up every Tuesday, building something new from the wreckage of our family. He was learning to make choices, to want things for himself. I was learning to live with being the person who destroyed our community to save it. The other debt children were scattered, some thriving, some struggling, all carrying scars that went deeper than copper burns. My parents had adapted, hiring employees, following labor laws. We hadn't spoken since the trial. My younger siblings remained with them, told I was dangerous, unstable. Maybe they were right. The system was gone, but its ghosts remained. In Nuka's hesitation before spending money. In the way former debt children still called their parents sir and ma'am. In the families who'd never recover financially from paying actual wages. Change had come at a price none of us fully understood when we'd started. But watching Nuka choose his own classes, make his own schedule, live his own life, I knew it had been worth it. Some traditions deserve to die, even if it means losing everything to cull them, even if it means being hated by the people you're trying to save. The copper scars would always be there, but they no longer determined anyone's future. That had to be enough.